Well, speaking of the Upper House, we've got two of its occupants joining us for our Monday panel. First up, Liberal Senator for New South Wales, Holly Hughes, and Labor Senator for WA, Louise Pratt. Welcome to both of you. We've got good geographic representation on the show today. Holly Hughes, I want to start with you. Of course, everyone is looking at the situation in the United States, looking at that outcome, Joe Biden being declared president, the winner of that contest. What do you think it means for Australia? Are we going to see a change in our relationship with the United States under this new administration?
Good afternoon, Matt. But Australia and the US have had a very long-standing relationship. And at the end of the day, the relationship's been based on whomever the Prime Minister is and whomever the President is at that particular time. And I would imagine our relationship with the US will continue. President-elect Biden has actually been out to Australia and had a long-standing working relationship with us in the past. And I imagine that that will continue into the future. And of course, obviously, there's some excitement around the first ever female Vice President being elected as well in Kamala Harris.
What do you think about Donald Trump's behaviour over the last few days? His refusal to concede, him throwing out accusations, unfounded accusations that there's been some sort of vote rigging and launching all these legal challenges. Is that behaviour befitting the office?
I think all of us are hopeful that a democratic outcome can be agreed to as soon as is humanly possible, and that we can, everyone, the US, Australia and the rest of the world can start to move forward as President Trump may transition out and President-elect Biden transitions into the role. But I don't see that there'll be any change to our relationship with the countries, regardless of anyone's behaviour.
Louise Pratt, we heard quite a bit last week of a number of politicians right around the world, former Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull saying that all the votes had to be counted. Do you think that Scott Morrison was strong enough in his comments about how the election was playing out in calling on Donald Trump, or not calling on Donald Trump necessarily, to respect the outcome?
Well, absolutely. The outcome was still looking a little bit uncertain back then. So the clear message from Australia is that it's in our national interest, whether it's Donald Trump or Joe Biden, to respect and work with the elected president. But personally, I'm very relieved to see that Joe Biden will now be able to take the presidency, and we now have to wait and see if Donald Trump can hold his tongue and respect the decision.
Well, just on the impact to Australia, we heard from your leader, Anthony Albanese, earlier today saying that Australia was being left behind because a Biden administration is going to take a much more ambitious stance on the issue of climate change. Is there an issue here where Labor hasn't been able to outline what its 2030 target for carbon emissions is going to be, yet it's calling on Australia to sign up to a 2050 target?
Well, I would really like to see, it's a relief, I think, for the world to see that America will now be on board with leading action on climate change, and that leaves Australia as an outlier now. And so it's a strong message to Scott Morrison and Matt Canavan that they really need to set some ambition. It's not just about, as they have said, that they've got their low emissions technological pathway. Other economies are making big structural adjustments, and our economy will be left behind unless we are part of that global momentum.
Holly Hughes, how would you respond to that critique of the Coalition's climate policy? This has been a fraught area for politicians in Australia for more than a decade now, and it does seem that if the Prime Minister is saying Australia will probably meet that 2050 net zero carbon emissions target, why can't the nation sign up to it formally?
Well, there isn't a 2050 target to sign up to formally. We welcome that the US is now talking about re-entering the Paris Agreement, but it's important to remember Australia never left the Paris Agreement, and we are well and truly on our target to meet the 2030 target that is required under Paris of 26 to 28% under our 2005 levels. We are well and truly on the road to that in a technology agnostic way. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was in Newcastle, started the morning at a lithium-ion battery manufacturing plant that's about to be built there, and then followed it up with a visit to a coal mine. We have a mixture of coal energy and renewable energy sources. We're committed to ensuring reliable and affordable baseload energy, and whatever that looks like. But we're also committed to reducing emissions and creating jobs. And I think it's actually a little bit irresponsible, and I think Joel Fitzgibbon, the member for Hunter, might agree with me, for the left to be jumping on the election or President-elect Joe Biden as now all of a sudden we need to start committing in this unprecedented time with so much economic uncertainty to really pie-in-the-sky targets. No one knew what 2020 was going to look like, and I don't think anyone ultimately could say they're going to know what 2030 looks like, but we are looking at a technologically agnostic approach to ensure that we have an affordable and reliable baseload energy. We have a manufacturing sector that on the back of COVID is being reinvigorated and seeing huge advances there. And we need to ensure that those manufacturing opportunities are provided with affordable and reliable baseload power. And that's about finding the right mix. We don't want to commit ourselves to something that's just some sort of rhetoric. And the other part of this, sorry, Senator Pratt, if I can just finish, the other part of this, and I noticed that Mr Albanese talked about New Zealand. What he doesn't talk about is the fact that New Zealand in their 2050 target have actually omitted agriculture and forestry from their target. So it's not just a slogan. There are actual details in these policies, and I realise the Labor Party doesn't have one at the moment, but perhaps as they prepare for the next election they might actually develop a policy with some detail rather than sound bites.
Well, let's give Louise Pratt the right of reply there. Holly Hughes has made a fair few character assessments about members of your party and how you're partaking in this debate. Do you agree with what Holly Hughes is saying there, that it's a pie-in-the-sky target?
Not at all. These emissions targets are real and achievable. The Labor Party's made them, but the current government also can't cheat and paper over its lack of ambition by counting Kyoto credits that shouldn't be on the table. Our emissions reductions need to be real. They need to be real in the context of reaching global goals so that we can really meaningfully mitigate the impacts on global climate and very much also on Australian climate. You know, we're seeing long-term job impacts in the tourism sector, and we stand to lose billions of dollars as an Australian economy because of the impacts of climate change. So we can't just paper our way over this. We have to have meaningful ambition, and it's wonderful to see that the US is now committed to that too, because with the US on board, we might finally have a meaningful chance of actually lowering global emissions in a way that really helps protect our planet.
I do think we're going to hear much more about climate through question time there, so I do want to move on to the other issue kicking around today, or the whole last week really, and that is the issue of trade with China. Holly Hughes, there does seem to be mixed messages going to some exporters about whether or not they can actually get their products into China. The Chinese state media are saying one thing, the Australian government saying another, the Chinese government themselves saying a third thing there. Is this confusion harming the Australian export industry?
The Morrison government is standing absolutely side by side with Australian exporters, and we want to ensure that they have access to China, but also a range of markets. China is obviously dealing with Australian exporters on an almost product-by-product basis at the moment, and they have claimed that it's due to technical issues. So we are hopeful that they're going to be resolved quickly and that trade resumes. But there has been important work also done by the Morrison government in the previous years, opening up a number of free trade agreements, and our exporters have never had more opportunities to access a variety of markets. These include 8 nations in the Pacific. We have Peru. We have conversations ongoing.
But we
with
are
the
still
EU,
very much
UK.
exposed to the Chinese market, and they are the ones that are taking the vast quantity of our products there. I do want to just bring in Louise Pratt just briefly there. Labor has been quite critical here in saying that the government needs to actually do more to get on the and support exporters. What more can they do, considering that there is these differing accounts of what the situation is?
Well, there's a lot more that can and needs to be done. We can't just abandon and tell people that they need to go and find an alternative market to China. China is simply too big, and Western Australia's been at the coalface of these issues, both in the rock lobster industry and with barley. It's all very well for Simon Birmingham to say, oh look, but we're doing okay in other areas. Western Australia can already see how hard this will hit. And I think one of the key issues will be, frankly, Simon Birmingham will be the Minister for Finance, the Leader of the Senate. We're actually going to need a new Trade Minister in terms of someone who's actually got some time meaningfully to give to these issues. In addition, we really need to work on resetting our relationship with China and focusing on the things we have in common, which for a long time has been at the forefront of that, has been our mutually beneficial trade relationships.
Well, Louise Pratt and Holly Hughes, we do need to let you go to question time. We can see people walking into the chamber behind you there, Louise Pratt. Thank you both for joining us. Now,
Thank you.